Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the San Martin SN006G-B1. This watch is available from watchdives.com for $258. You can use the discount code WR4K to get $10 discount off any watch over $150 on watchdives.com. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this black plastic Pelican style case. I'll show you the interior. As you can see, both halves of the Pelican case are lined with two foam panels, which does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. I like these Pelican style cases because they are very durable. With regards to the items, this is the warranty card. Usually San Martin watches are covered by a 2-year international warranty. However, if you purchase the watch from Watch Dives, they cover it with an additional 12 months of warranty. So the watch has a 3-year warranty, which is very reassuring. This is the owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and it details the operation of the movement use, which is the Epson caliber YN55A automatic. And one also gets this free NATO strap, so stainless steel hardware. The two keepers are brass satin finish, stitched either side to prevent them sliding out of position. Nice heavy gauge to the 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang. And the quality of the nylon is good. Very soft and supple, it's not going to require any breaking in. Nice weave to it with contrasting grey and beige stripes running down the centre. Plenty of holes to allow for fine tuning the length. It will fit up to an 8-inch wrist. Around the holes are welded so they're not going to fray with regular use. The end of the strap is also welded to prevent it fraying with regular use. So it's a good quality NATO strap and a good alternative if the oyster style bracelet that comes fitted to the head of the piece isn't your personal taste. One also gets this vial which contains Threadlock, and I've reviewed over 300 watches on my channel. San Martin are the only brand I've seen do this, and they deserve full credit for this, including a vial of Threadlock. So you can heat up the Threadlock on the screw pins in the bracelet links using a butane blowtorch, and that will break the bond. And then after you unscrew the screw pins and resize the bracelet, before screwing in the 1.6mm screw pins, you dip them into this blue Threadlock and then screw them in, and this will cure after 24 hours and prevent these screw pins accidentally unscrewing. So good to get the Threadlock included for resizing the bracelet. One also gets this stainless steel spring bar tool, push pin at one end, and on the other end we have a two-prong fork. No shank to it, solid stainless steel, good quality. And lastly, one also gets this stainless steel 1.6mm flathead screwdriver for removing the screw pins when resizing the bracelet. Again, it has a knurled shank and it's solid stainless steel. Good quality screwdriver, and nice to get these kind of accessories included with the watch. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the San Martin SN006G-B1. So, what is the difference between the B1 version and the standard 006G? Well, the previous version of the 006 had a San Martin cursive text logo printed on the dial at 12 o'clock. It also had an S crown, and it also had printed indices on the dial. So, this B1 version uses the applied San Martin hex at 12 o'clock, and it also has applied indices rather than printed, and they've updated the crown from the S crown to the San Martin hex crown, so notable improvements. With regards to dimensions, it has a 40mm case diameter, it has a 49mm lug-to-lug measurement, 13mm thickness, and the lug width is 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the 2-button push clasp, and the clasp is embossed with the San Martin hex to a high standard, as you can see. Nice heavy gauge to the 316L grade stainless steel body of the clasp. 4 micro adjustment holes. I'm always critical of brands only having 2 or 3 micro adjustment holes. San Martin deserve credit for making the correct decision by having 4 micro adjustment holes, which allows for plenty of fine tuning to get the length correct. The clasp is finished to perfection, beautiful lustre to the 316L grade stainless steel brass satin finishing, nice large mirror polished bevel to the edge of the body and also the end, no sharp edges, doesn't have sharp corners, and it's very well executed. One of my favourite clasps I've seen on a watch. Good foam resistance to the 2-button push triggers. The interior is finished to a good standard. Brass satin finish to the top side, underside and flanks. Beautiful lustre to the stainless steel. As you can see, the brass satin finishing is just sublime, and it snaps shut with a nice positive click. So it's an example to other brands of how to get a clasp correct. Very aesthetically pleasing and very well finished. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double dome sapphire crystal with AR coating on the underside. When I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see the clear AR coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver applied indices, the silver applied hex logo and the silver mirror polished Mercedes handset. The Mercedes handset is correctly proportioned. The second hand is long enough to extend to the minute ticks on the chaptering, and the minute hand is also correctly proportioned. The pointed tip of the pencil second minute hand extends all the way to the minute ticks. I like the fact the dial isn't over-branded with unnecessary text or specification. We simply have the San Martin applied hex at 12 o'clock and then automatic 660 feet equals 200 meters at 6 o'clock. Just the right amount of information. Now, the applied indices are smaller than the Rolex Maxi dial used on the Submariner, and I like that because it gives it a vintage aesthetic. This looks like a Submariner 140/60M with the smaller applied indices rather than the larger Maxi dial proportions. I love the perfect symmetry with the absence of a date complication, and it really is a very good homage to the Rolex Submariner. With regards to the bezel, it's ceramic bezel insert, and the scalloped bezel is finished to perfection, no sharp edges to the points to the scallops, brush satin finish to it, and it's just absolutely gorgeous the way the brush satin finishing catches the light. The scallops are very well finished, and it's just a beautiful looking bezel. Solid 316L grade stainless steel. I like the double domed sapphire crystal which projects above the top edge of the ceramic bezel inset. It's like a top hat crystal, and it's just got a lovely profile to it. The AR coating works very well, the legibility is excellent, and I love the symmetry of the dial. I think the applied San Martin hex looks better than the San Martin cursive printed text logo they used on the previous version of the 006, and really the B1 is better executed. It looks better with the San Martin hex crown rather than the S crown embossed. One thing I really like about it is the use of holes in the lugs. Now, if you're using a strap and it doesn't have quick release spring bars, the advantage of having holes in the lugs is you can depress the spring bar externally using a push pin in the spring bar tool, and that means it's easier to remove straps if you're changing the bracelet, and also adds to the vintage aesthetic of the piece. It does look like a vintage Rolex 5513 or alternatively a 140/60M with the holes in the lugs, and I think it looks very good, but it's also very practical. With regards to the bracelet, female pivoted end links are a good tight fit to the case, very well finished, and they articulate very smoothly. They feel very similar to my Tudor Black Bay 58 female pivoted end links. That's how smooth they are, and they do give a very good fit. If you're a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you'll really enjoy the extra articulation rather than it having male end links, which would extend the effective 49mm lug to lug measurement. So this does give a very snug fit. It means that the end link in the bracelet can pull down close to the wrist to give a snug fit. The oyster style bracelet is finished to an outstanding standard. Beautiful luster to the 316L grade stainless steel. The brush satin finishing is just sublime, and that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. 1.6mm screw pins are very well finished, and the bracelet articulates very smoothly. No extra play in the links, but no kinks, and it's very well done. So I really like the bracelet. With regards to the case back, solid 316L grade stainless steel. The case back is sterile. It provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, and it's very low profile, as you can see, bearing in mind this houses a YN55A automatic, and I like the fact it's perfectly sterile, flat and smooth, because it means it's very comfortable to wear against the wrist for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. The female pivoted solid end links are a good tight fit to the case, very well finished, and the underside to the case is also very well finished with a brush satin finish, no sharp edges to the underside to the flanks. With regards to the crown, it's coin edge finished, embossed with a San Martin hex to a very high standard, as you can see. So let's test the screw down crown execution. The screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, absolutely silky smooth, no friction whatsoever, perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So this is an example to other brands of how to get screw down crown execution correct. It really is outstanding. So in the first position, one can manually wind the caliber YN55A automatic to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. In terms of smoothness, it does feel smoother when manually winding than a PT5000. It feels very similar to an NH35A. The architecture of the YN55A is very similar to the NH35A, and it does have a very similar feeling to the tension building up in the mainspring. Absolute pleasure to manually wind it, much smoother than a PT5000, and I think they've made the correct decision by using the YN55A versus the PT5000 in this B1 version of the 006. So, the YN55A does have a date wheel, it does have a date complication. The date wheel is present beneath the dial despite having no date window. So pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. Rotating the crown anti-clockwise, one can feel the date wheel clicking over with a quick set, and it feels very similar to an NH35A. Pulling it out to the second click position is the final click position, and that is the time setting position. Again, it feels very similar to an NH35A in the time setting position. No backplay clockwise and anti-clockwise. There's an immediate response when one rotates the crown clockwise or anti-clockwise. The minute hand immediately responds and moves. With the Miyota 8215, I've been critical of in previous reviews. There is some backplay clockwise and anti-clockwise, and I regard the YN55A to be equal quality to the 35A, and it's a level above the 8215. So I like the fact there's no backplay, it feels tighter, no friction in the gearing, it feels very smooth clockwise and anti-clockwise, and there's no discernible difference between the 35A and the 55A respectively. They feel exactly the same. The 55A has hacking. As you can see, I've now hacked the second hand, so it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. So let's test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup. This is outstanding screw down crown execution. The internal thread immediately interfaces, it immediately picks up the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube, and one can feel the compression of the O-rings. There are two rubber O-rings, one inside the crown and one inside the crown tube, and the two rubber O-rings provide the 200 meters of hermetic seal. Absolutely silky smooth, 10 out of 10. This cannot be improved upon. It really is outstanding screw down crown execution. With regards to the bezel, it's 120 click unidirectional bezel as one would expect. It feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. In terms of resistance, it feels lighter than a Steinhardt Ocean 139. Feels very similar to a Seiko bezel action if you're familiar with a Seiko 5KX or a Seiko SKX007 or a Seiko Turtle. That's the kind of resistance, very similar to Seiko bezel action. Doesn't feel too firm and it doesn't feel too light. I don't like the bezel action on a Steinhardt Ocean 139, that's too stiff, but this feels very like a Seiko bezel action. They've got the balance just right. It's not too light or too heavy, and it's very smooth. Now the thing I really like about it is the loud audible clicks. One can really hear the 120 clicks. It's a very loud ratcheting mechanism and it's very pleasant to hear. I really like the sound of it. No lateral side-side play whatsoever, no back play whatsoever. So although it's got a medium resistance like a Seiko bezel action, it has the same tightness in terms of lateral side-side and also back play as a Steinhardt Ocean 139, which is slightly too tight. So San Martin have got the perfect 10 out of 10 bezel execution. I love the smoothness, I love the loud audible clicks and also the no play in it. Let's just check the alignment. Perfect. The Lume Pippin triangle perfectly aligned with the 12 o'clock triangle index on the dial. So this is again an example to other brands of how to get it correct. Perfect screw down crown execution, perfect bezel execution. They really cannot be improved upon. Now with regards to the ceramic on the bezel insert, they've inlaid it with paint, and it's white paint and it contrasts very well with the glossy finish to the ceramic. They've made the correct decision by using white rather than using silver to try and replicate the platinum inlay used on Rolex Cerachrome bezels, and I like the white because it has good legibility. It contrasts very well with the glossy black. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, minor criticism, the one negative of the watch, is the bracelet is tight to get over my hand, as you can see, and it is actually tight on my 8-inch wrist. Now I can close the clasp, but it's a tight fit. I would like to see San Martin include an extra additional full link, because for 8-inch wrist you'll find that this is the absolute maximum. I've got it on position 4 of the 4 micro adjustments, so this is now on maximum extension, and as you can see, it's a tight fit on my 8-inch wrist, so really for comfort I would like an additional link. But however, for the majority of collectors with a 6 to 7.5 inch wrist, the Oyster Star bracelet does have enough links to fit you comfortably. And bear in mind, I like to size my bracelets loose so I can slide an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp. For most collectors that like a snug fit, this will suffice. Now, the proportions of the piece are very close to perfection. 49mm lug-to-lug measurement is 1mm longer than perfection. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider 48mm to be the sweet spot. 48mm is the perfect lug-to-lug, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. At 49, it's just 1mm longer than perfection. The 40mm head of the piece is the perfect diameter for the head of the piece for all wrist sizes. Beautiful taper to the lugs, and I love the slender taper and also the large bevels which mark the transition between the brushed satin finished tops of the lugs and the mirror polished flanks. So the case is very well proportioned. It looks like a Rolex Submariner Classic case as used on the 16610 and the 14060M respectively. Female pivoted end links articulate very well. As you can see, the end link in the bracelet articulates, it pulls down very snug to the wrist. This gives a better fit. Had they used male end links, the female pivoted end links are the correct choice, and especially if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you'll really enjoy the articulation of the female pivoted end links. They've made the correct decision. 20 to 16 is the perfect taper on the oyster style bracelet. And the clasp is just finished to perfection. This is perfection personified. Beautiful bevels, which are mirror polished, beautiful luster. I like the embossed San Martin hex and the 2 button push triggers. It's just finished to perfection. So the bracelet is very well finished. The head of the piece is very well finished. I love the scallops on the bezel and the double domed top hat style crystal. As you can see, they are coating. Everything about it looks good, feels good. Now it's 149 grams, and as you'll know from my previous reviews, for a 40mm head of the piece on an oyster style bracelet, I consider circa 150 grams to be the sweet spot. It gives a nice feeling of wrist presence and heft, but without it feeling top heavy, unbalanced, or too heavy to wear for comfort for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. At 149 grams with all the links in the oyster bracelet, this is the perfect weight. So circa 150 gives a nice balance. 149 is perfect. The only thing I would change is slightly reduce the lug to 48 to get it to perfection, but 49 is very close. So good looking piece, feel good factor is good, comfort level is outstanding. It's one of the greatest looking San Martin pieces ever made, absolutely gorgeous. And it does look very similar to a Rolex Submariner 14060M, although it has the enhancement of a ceramic bezel, which of course is more scratch resistant than the aluminium bezel that was used on the 14060M. Just a gorgeous looking piece. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So just bear with me. I'm going to put my glove back on and then I'll continue. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute maximum. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. This is clearly BGW9 Super Luminova, and what we're looking at is 5 to 6 layers. I'm pleased to see San Martin haven't used the cost-cutting measure of 3 to 4 layers. So there's no discernible difference between the quality of the BGW9 Super Luminova that San Martin are using and the Rolex Chrome Light, or alternatively Seiko Luma Brights, which are the very best Super Luminovas used in the watchmaking industry. Good colour tone match between the Lume pip on the ceramic bezel insert, the applied indices and the Mercedes hands. The blue tone looks exactly the same on the Lume pip, dial and hands. And it's clearly 5 to 6 layers on the dial and 5 to 6 layers on the Mercedes handset. It's glowing incredibly brightly and it will continue to glow for a long length of time. So again, this is an example to other brands of how to get it correct. The Lume is incredibly bright, the colour tone match is correct, and of course we've got 5 to 6 layers versus 3 to 4. No cost cutting measures whatsoever. This is top grade BGW9 Super Luminova. It looks exactly the same as Rolex Chrome Light, and I think it's outstanding. I love the blue tone of it, and I think they've made the correct decision by using BGW9 versus C3. BGW9 does give outstanding performance. It's very bright, and BGW9 is a brighter blue than the green tone used in C3. So outstanding. As you can see, it's not fading whatsoever, and it's glowing for a good length of time, and I think it's very impressive. San Martin deserve full credit for using top grade BGW9. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Epson caliber YN55A, which is made in Japan. So the YN55A is a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. It's been well used by Orient in a number of pieces, such as the Kamasu. Orient call it the Orient Caliber F6922, but the F6922 is exactly the same as the YN55A. The only difference is the YN55A is branded as Epson, the F6922 is branded by Orient. Now, it has 22 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. The architecture of the YN55A is very similar to the NH35A. The only discernible difference is the NH35A has 24 joules, the YN55A has 22 joules respectively, so 2 joules less. 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy is -25 to +35 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range. Now I'll put that into perspective. The 35A has a stated accuracy of -20 to +40. The 55A has a stated accuracy of -25 to +35. So very similar accuracy, a wide accuracy range. This one has been very well regulated by San Martin and it's running consistently at +5 seconds per day, which is actually within chronometer limits of -4 to +6. So to get +5 out of a YN55A is outstanding accuracy, and that's when it's fully wound to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. It has hand binding and hacking, which use for complications, and the only negative is the extra click position on the crown, because it does have a date wheel. The date complication is present beneath the dial. Now with an NH38, which would have been the other option, that would delete the extra click position because it doesn't have a date complication. The 38 is the no date version of the 35A. So one could argue that San Martin should have used the 38 because this doesn't have a date complication, and that would delete the extra click position. This is subjective. For some collectors, the extra click position is irritating. It's something they dislike. Personally, I don't have a problem with it, pulling it out to the second click to set the time, but one just has to be careful not to set the time when one is in the first click position to avoid damaging the movement. Now, having said that, because the YN55A has similar architecture to the 35A, there really is no damage risk between 10 PM and 4 AM. Usually with automatic movements, one is advised to avoid setting the time when the date is between 10 PM and 4 AM because one can damage the movement. But with the YN55A and the NH35A, damage doesn't occur. So although you can't see the position of the date wheel, there's no damage. If you set the watch, for example, at midnight, you're not going to damage the movement. So I regard the YN55A to be equal in quality to the 35A. There's no discernible difference. The build quality, quality control, materials and accuracy are very similar. The only real difference, as I've detailed, is the 35A has 24 joules. The 55A has 22 joules, but the performance is equal. And +5 seconds per day is perfectly accurate enough. 40 hours of power reserve, hand binding and hacking. Now, in terms of smoothness, the one thing I really like about the 55A is it is smoother to manually wind than the PT5000. It's also more reliable in terms of manual winding, and unscrewing and screwing back down the crown feels better on the YN55A versus the PT5000. With PT5000 watches, it can be difficult. One has to really push in the crown, and it can be difficult to get the threads to pick up because the winding stem is very spring-loaded on a PT5000, and therefore one really has to push in the crown hard, and it can be difficult to get the internal thread to pick up on the external thread of the crown tube. With the 55A, one doesn't have that resistance. The winding stem isn't as spring-loaded. It pushes in easily and it unscrews easily. So I actually prefer the YN55A to the PT5000 for manual winding and also for unscrewing and screwing in the crown when setting the time. So very similar to the NH35A, which you'll be familiar with. And really, I don't think it matters whether one buys a piece with the NH35A or the YN55A. They really are equal in every aspect. I think it's a good, reliable movement. And as I've detailed, it's well proven by Orient in several models, such as the Kamasu, as the Caliber F6922. Right, so lastly I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the price point is $258. You can use the discount code WR4K to get $10 off that price. So the price point then becomes $248. Yes, this is unquestionably excellent quality and excellent value at $248. This is one of the greatest San Martin watches ever made. They've got everything about this correct. There are no negatives to this piece whatsoever. They've updated the crown to the hex crown. That was the one criticism I had of the previous version of the 006. They used the embossed S crown. The hex crown looks better. The applied indices look better than the printed indices, and also the applied hex looks better than the printed San Martin cursive logo. So this really is without any negatives whatsoever. Now, the only thing I would like to see personally is them add an additional link, because as I've demonstrated, the oyster style bracelet is slightly tight on my 8-inch wrist, but again, this is a minor criticism because for the majority of collectors with a 6 to 7.5-inch wrist, the bracelet will fit. No negatives to the watch whatsoever. The build quality, quality control, materials and the finishing are all outstanding. With regards to the finishing, this is the kind of finishing one would expect to see on a mid-tier piece costing €3,000. It's really not far off my Tudor Black Bay 58 in terms of the brush satin finishing, the bevels, the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks, the luster to the bracelet, as you can see, and the mirror polishing to the flanks, the finishing to the clasp. It really is close to Tudor levels. So that is the level of finishing. We're looking at €3,000 price point finishing on a piece that costs only $248 US. So I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for made money, and I'm going to highly recommend it to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the San Martin SN006G-B1. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.